You wanna know what's really sad though? In the season 5 episodes where they copy elements from earlier seasons, you can instantly tell that it's difficult to find the positives that really made the episode worthwhile. And for me personally, Fam Scam is a perfect example of that. And do you wanna know the sad truth about all this? The Casagrandes episode Home Improvement came out in February 2021, while Fam Scam came out in November of 2022. Like I said in my last Loud House vs. Casagrandes video, it's the other way around, and I do mean it. Since this is the third time I'm using a season 5 episode from the Loud House by comparing it to a Casagrandes episode, it's honestly surprising to think that it's actually from this episode alone. Now, there is another episode that has similar themes as Fam Scam, but I'm gonna get to that later because there are multiple reasons onto why I picked this episode over the other episode. When it comes to Home Improvement, it's honestly bizarre to think that one of the side characters, Laird, is really capable of just trying to hide a secret towards his friends way more better than Lola, which is really saying something because there's going to be multiple times that Lola is going to be Carlos when it comes to their episodes in the future. But when it comes to this occasion, it really feels like that Laird is way ahead of himself. All the while Lola, it's really difficult to take her character seriously for how the writing is just toning her character down for the sake of just making so much conflicts. In Fam Scam, Lola desperately wants to become best friends with one of the new pageant girls, Cricket, but due to the embarrassment of her family, she came up with a solution by lying to Cricket on being a McBride. However, she only told Clyde for another food test because in the other day while Clyde was making food for the Loud siblings, it gave Lola the solution to do another food test at Clyde's place. So apparently she didn't tell Clyde about faking of being a McBride, just only using him. And to be perfectly real, out of all the times I've seen Lola's selfish bad deeds, this isn't even a selfish bad deed, but at the same time, it wouldn't be an issue to be honest with Clyde in order to fake that she's a McBride. I mean, granted, Clyde's parents won't approve, but at the same time, it would have been better off simple instead of what Lola went through in this episode. In Home Improvement, Laird is nervous of celebrating movie night at his place, so he convinced Ryan to have movie night at her father's place. Considering of what the ending is involving this episode, it's further proof that they instantly knew how to make a character like Laird somewhat sympathetic, knowing full well that in Lola's situation, it's pretty obvious that she's only doing this, and yet at the same time, Laird had think of a better strategy, even though that he is way more nervous than Lola. Even if Lola's life is a lot more complicated than Laird's, it doesn't change the fact that she didn't even tell Clyde about what she's really doing. So when Cricket comes over to Clyde's house, that she thinks that Lola is Clyde's brother, she instantly overreacts over literally fake spirals in order to hide her true identity. And for me personally, this is a further indication that this is a major downgrade compared to what she did in Community to Surface, because she was at least intelligent in that episode, while in this episode, it really feels like that she is new in pageants. which for me personally, I don't buy even in the slightest. When it comes to Laird, he became Wang friend in the episode Team Effort, where Wang needed to find a sixth teammate. Granted, he did make appearances before, but mostly a background character. So, to be perfectly real, his motivations in this episode is somewhat relatable, but when it comes to the ending, it can really sums up on how his relatability is way more compared to Lola's. Granted, it's also wrong for Leo to use a tutor's apartment as his own for one night, but in all honesty, considering that the majority of home improvement is taking place in one location, while in Lola's scenario that after McBride's house, she had to deal with avoiding her siblings at all costs in order to convince Cricket that she is still a McBride. And considering that Laird is just trying to convince his friends that he has a normal home, all the while that he's just not trying to impress them by any means necessary, it really makes his situation a lot more simple compared to Lola, who is trying to impress a pageant girl. Like, regardless if what Laird did in this episode may be questionable, at least he was desperate and he was trying to be nice, even though that there were a few embarrassing moments along the way. Look, I understand that Lola's situation is somewhat complicated from a pageant girl's perspective, well, in Loud House universe. Well, Cricket is one of the most famous pageant girls, and she wants to be friends with her, knowing full well that she lives in a family that is considered normal, while Lola's family is the complete opposite. And with the addition of how Cricket is supposed to be a lot more better than Lola, it really feels like that they want you to forget all the terrible things that Lola did in the past, which, by any means necessary, it makes sense considering that Lola is nice and didn't have any tempo issues in this episode. It doesn't change the fact that she just made the situation a lot more complicated than it had to be, knowing full well that it would have been simple if she just convinced Clyde. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having the majority of the episode of Lola avoiding her siblings. Let me tell you, I did not like the bits of Lola avoiding her family. It may be relatable, but considering that another episode had tackled this ideal and it did it much more better, just goes to show that if you look into the point of view of Lola when it comes to how she's portrayed in this episode, you could have done it a lot more better, knowing full well of what she did in the past is an indication of how that she can be intelligent whenever she's manipulative. And to be real with you, the fact that she wasn't being manipulative in this episode whatsoever makes this episode even less interesting. And what I mean by manipulator is how she nearly was this close to threaten Lincoln in Sound of Silence. Granted, it may be either blackmail, but in all honesty, knowing full well that she slightly changed over time, I can instantly tell that this episode would have been better off if she wasn't like this. Mainly just how she was portrayed, and the fact that she just instantly had a perfect opportunity to make the solution much more simpler instead of just being a little child, which in all honesty, regardless if there were a few episodes where Lola or even Lana's behavior is somewhat understandable because they're the youngest twins of the family, it's still really redundant to see them being in this position, knowing full well that every character around them are just dumbed down. And believe me, when Cricket sees the pictures that Lola put by Clyde and his fathers, she instantly believes, including Clyde's fathers, which for me personally sums up everything onto why that this is one of the weakest episodes of Season 5. Like, argue if Lola is a manipulator or not, but in all honesty, just by seeing this and how lackluster it is, there was a reason onto why people can't stand the flamization in the later seasons of The Loud House. At least in Home Improvement, when Leonard is showing most of the stuff to his friends, it felt convincing because he doesn't know how to do any of the stuff in Ryan's father's apartment. And for me personally, it's a perfect indication that he had less knowledge of Ryan and her family. And if you think that wasn't enough, he has a crush towards Ryan after one of his friends noticed the box of chocolates labeled on the front to Ryan. If you ask me, this really sums up onto why this is the only episode centering around Leonard. And if there ever is going to be a day where Lincoln and Leonard meet for the first time, they will definitely have nothing in common. I guess it's time for me to discuss the episode that has similar themes towards this, but it's way better. The episode is Right and Wrong from Season 4. In that episode, Rita needs to be perfect along with her siblings in order to be part of the perfect parenting advice column or some sort. Granted, it's really obvious that she isn't a perfect parent, but considering that whole situation is a lot more important compared to Lola's or even Leo's, I have to admit that her motivations make sense, and I have to admit that this episode is better than Home Improvement. But one of the reasons why I didn't use this episode in comparison of Home Improvement is because it had nothing to do with homes or apartments. Mainly, it focuses on Rita just trying to build a perfect reputation in front of people who never seen her family before. And considering that the majority of the episode is loud siblings just doing their own thing, which is honestly repetitive if you think about it, it somewhat makes sense for Rita's situation to make sure that her family is perfect. It really had nothing to do with where she lives. Granted, it had something to do with siblings, but it's mainly about the buildings. And to be real with you, knowing forward that Rita would ended up being called out on it at the end of the episode, I can't really blame her knowing forward that she is just trying to build a reputation on being a good parent. And to be real with you, this is one of the only episodes that I actually enjoyed from Rita. And another example, I don't think she is willing to do that for a friend. She did it with important people, but not for a friend. And in all honesty, the stress that Lola went through in Fam Scam really shows. Believe me, when it comes to the endings of both episodes, I can easily say that Home Improvement is better, mainly the fact that they think that Ryan's dad is actually an intruder, when in reality it's just Ryan's father. So in all honesty, whenever I see the ending of Fam Scam, it's not as good compared to Right and Wrong. It just feels weak knowing full well that she ends up becoming friends with Cricket. Like, if this is literally the only way for a shipping thing to happen between the two, I'm just gonna say this right now, it's not really the best. Because for me personally, it's really difficult to connect these two characters when Cricket is mostly blinded of what is happening around her. Like, she is nice, I can give her that, but at the same time it doesn't change the fact that her IQ has been lowered down for the sake for this episode's plot to work. Even the bit where she kissed Clyde's cheeks. In all honesty, this is supposed to be cute because this is supposed to be how she meets people, but in all honesty, it really shows that the scene where Leod has a crush towards Ryan is a lot more better, mainly the fact that there was actual context in that scene. The context I see from this is mainly the fact that it's a misunderstanding, but done poorly, knowing forward that Clyde is unaware of what is really going on. So anyway, the biggest reason onto why Leod refused to tell where he actually lives, all the while spending movie nights at, is because he lived in the mansion. Which, for me personally, Lola and Cricket would be highly jealous if they ever meet Leod in this franchise. And for me personally, knowing full well that I did see a show where a kid lived in a mansion and his life is just difficult to take control due to that issue, you can easily tell the relatability is through the max involving Leod compared to Lola from Fam Scam. So anyway, Fam Scam is not one of the worst episodes of the show, but it's one of the weakest episodes, which is why Home Improvement from the Casagrandes wins. And whenever I completely look at Fam Scam, it just becomes a lot more weaker and weaker. Like I said, I choose wisely whenever I do these types of videos, and the fact that I've been doing more than 20 videos involving the Loud House vs. Casagrandes really says a lot. Granted, I'm not going to keep this up forever, but I still have multiple ideas. It's gonna be difficult to think on whether the Casagrandes can beat the Loud House, but at the same time, there is no reward on whoever wins. I'm not being a downer, it's just when it comes to these episodes, it really feels bizarre that a Casagrandes episode came before while the Loud House episode took inspiration from Home Improvement. Which is really difficult to believe up until now. If this ever happens again, I can guarantee you it will be a lot more difficult to believe at first, including myself, but I'm not sure if it will ever happen, knowing full well that this is the only time I'm ever going to witness a Casagrandes episode being out first rather than the other way around with the Loud House. I'm giving Fam Scam a 4.75 out of 10, while Home Improvement gets a 6.25 out of 10.